Welcome to our Masters 2020 MTA sessions. This is MFX Flex Design Concepts. This is a brand new course. This is one of many that will be taking place between now and the end of May. All courses will be available for you after, as shown here. On Online Help Answer ID 2015. Please use the questions and answer button below. I see many of you are doing that now. We will do our best to respond to as many as we possibly can during the session. After this session ends officially, we are going to stick around and continue with questions and answers. You'll be able to raise your hand and ask to speak with us. We will do our best to accommodate as many of you as we can. We do have over 2,000 people registered for today's event. So hopefully we'll be able to get to as many questions as possible for you. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to introduce our team. Jason, if you'd like to start a little bit here, it'd be great. Of course, this is MFX-201 Flex Design Concepts. Our instructor is Mr. Jason Molden. He is the Technical Director for Unified Communications Enterprise. He is based out of Chicago, here in the United States. Me, I'm Richard Sasson. I'm the Global Director of Technical Services. I'm based in New Jersey. And we are joined from Canada with Jonathan Garcia. He is our Technical Director for Unified Communication Enterprise, again, out of Canada. We also have with us Sherry Goldberg and Carl Walkovich, who are helping us on the back end to make sure that everything is going smoothly. Please use the question and answer section as you have questions. We look forward to you enjoying this class, and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Jason Molden. Jason, it's all you, my good sir.
Thanks, Rich. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back. Very excited. Tuesday was tremendous for us in terms of the turnout that we had. I don't know what, Rich, the final count, 1,763 people, I think, what ultimately attended MTA 201 on Tuesday. So like I said, we're very happy for the expansion of the community and happy to bring this session to you today. Just one recap from the point Rich had made there. Because of the high number of questions that are being asked, we're going to do a cool down session at the conclusion of the presentation, and that'll give you an opportunity to ask additional questions there. We're all going to stay on. We've got a great team here today on the technical side between myself and Jonathan on the UC products specifically. You know, we're living with these products today, and then as well, as Rich mentioned, our team that's with us to help answer any logistical questions you might have about master's registration, anything like that. So once again, welcome back. Happy to have you, and let's go ahead and dive right in. So for the class today that we're talking about, this is a class that's focused specifically on the Flex line of products. This class blurs a little bit between general knowledge and Crestron product knowledge as we move forward in the MTA session. But I want to level set a little bit. Jonathan and Rich and I had an opportunity to go through a lot of the questions that we received from the Q&A on Tuesday. And really, if there was one takeaway, the diversity of our audience that's going through these sessions this week is amazing. At the same time, we have varying levels of experience and knowledge, interest, all over the place everywhere. And we love and appreciate the diversity that we have. And we like having these sessions to try to move the meter up for everybody, basically. But I wanted to start with two specific things. And number one is just a description. When we talk UC, Jonathan and I both have that title, UC Enterprise. What does that mean? So our particular focus within the company is on products that live inside of what's referred to as unified communications. Unified communications, or the term you see, as a concept. There are no specific rules to what's included. I listed some of the basics that we see. More often than not, you will find some variation in the offerings based on the particular platform. But for the most part, UC solutions encompass a few key things: video conferencing, audio conferencing. Telephony can be brought in the mix. But what we're really seeing now with the rise and the growth specifically of Microsoft Teams and Zoom and other services is the extension further away from the communication component in a person-to-person or an AV sense, and now we're wrapping in documentation, file sharing. When you think about what happens inside of a Microsoft Teams environment, some of the additional functions you have with Zoom, we really start to expand that offering. So it's constantly changing, but the baseline that we talk about for UC encompasses those products. And these solutions, and specifically Flex, brings that all under one hood. Second thing I want to mention, BYOD. It's a very ambiguous term that moves in and out of a lot of these conversations. And I wanted to draw a distinction that BYOD, really, if you break it down, I want to be able to leverage a personal device of a user and make it part of the overall ecosystem. It could be a laptop, it could be a phone, it could be a tablet, it could be anything along those lines, but we're talking about those devices that belong to the users as opposed to belonging to the room themselves. And there's that interaction. BYOD can spawn a number of different conversations. We can be in a case where BYOD is the facilitator for a conferencing solution. We can also have a case as we think about Teams and we think about Zoom specifically. Now we're in a case where the personal device augments the experience and it's part of unified communications, but we need to wrap that device into it. So just a couple important distinctions as we go through some of the design topics. I want you to keep that in mind, that we have two very vague, very large topics that really kind of govern what we're talking about with these product spaces. Okay. The Crestron Flex line, I'm sure many of you are familiar with it, but as a reset, this particular line of products that Crestron has in the market are geared towards base platforms, if you will. We have an ability to interact with the Microsoft suite, and that can encompass both Skype and Teams. And there's a lot of overlay between the two. It isn't a hard line of moving from one to the other. We have a lot of customers that are working through a migration in their organization, and the solutions will support both. We obviously have our commitment to the Zoom platform, and then we also continue to offer what we refer to as OpenUC. OpenUC effectively leveraging the personal device, using technology in the room, and facilitating some form of unified communications with the combination of those two devices together. So as we move through the designs and we talk about these items in detail, we always want to keep in mind there's a base platform to these conversations. The systems, the OpenUC systems, don't require a specific platform. When we think about the team solutions and we think about Zoom solutions, they do require that interaction or that previous existence of the platform in order for those solutions to take off. So Jonathan and I spent a lot of time going through the conversations with customers, and when we think about design, design is still there in the middle piece of the pie, if you will. But there are two other activities that wrap that conversation together, and it's a constant cycle of reevaluation. So we think about design. For me, design starts with a consultation with the customer, because in the UC space, the approach is slightly different. When we finish, then we have to think about the deployment of said functions because there are other parties in the mix. And so it becomes a very holistic conversation, and we need to think about making sure we have all the team players involved across my organization, my customer's organization, whoever's involved in the mix there of providing, installing, servicing, maintaining. We have to work through these particular scenarios. So I want to start with consultations. This is a tactic. Myself and Jonathan are affiliated with a particular group within Crestron, which is the UC Enterprise team. We focus specifically on these product bases, these product mixes, and as a result, we've gone through many of these conversations with customers, and I want to share my approach with you as we get into the design topic so you really can get a feel for, many of you are familiar with it, but at the same time, if you're not, how you go about qualifying the questions that you might ask the user about their particular solution. So,
hey, Jason, before you jump into that, can we find out a little bit about what our customers are using?
Sure, absolutely.
Their familiarity?
Throw up a poll question?
Yeah, let's bring up a poll question. I'd like to know, and here's the poll question. We'll leave this up for about a minute, folks. What platforms are you and your customers using? You can choose whichever ones you use. It's a multiple choice, multiple answer. There is no wrong answer here. And we look forward to seeing what the results are. So Jason, if you want to continue, we'll let that run for a minute.
Yep, okay. All right, so great segue, Rich, because as we're asking you, this is the question I always ask the customer, and there's an order of importance or order of operation that we're going to go through in all these conversations. Crestron's been involved with unified communications in a number of products. We've been involved heavily with Microsoft in their space, as well as Zoom, through different product generations. And one thing we always find that's interesting is we end up in conversations sometimes when the cart before the horse, or the inverted conversation. And we have a conversation where we focus on the hardware first and we focus on the platform second. And as we move into these base platform and the growth of these other services, this is where we start. So it's not only asking the customers which particular platform you're using, but it's also to know, what are you doing with that platform? Where do you stand in the platform? So I always start with the first question: what's your platform? So to Rich's point with the question, let's say a customer answers back and they say, okay, we're a Microsoft house or a Microsoft shop and we're using, Skype or Teams, whatever it is. Well, that's not enough of an answer for me. So then I drop down to the second part, because now that I have some direction, now I have to start thinking about the other possibilities. So when I think about Skype and Teams, what's your mode? If a customer says they have anything to do with Skype and Skype is mentioned, then it immediately tells me that they may be somewhere in the process or the journey of moving from Skype to Skype for Business Online, or even into Teams. So there's a topic that you may want to familiarize yourself with in the Microsoft realm called coexistence. And that will tell you in what form the system is functioning currently within the organization. Tell me your coexistence mode, and then I can get a feel for where you are, and then I can start to think about what positions or what solutions can I position correctly. It's a good approach. With Zoom, I want to know what the other services are. We know Zoom's an amazing platform for collaboration, for video, ease of use. But remember, at the same time, we have components that are always brought in. Zoom doesn't have an email component per se, so I'm going to be bringing in my G Suite. I'm going to bring in my Exchange. And so when I approach that, I want to know, okay, what else is in the mix here? What else do I have to factor in? Lastly, they come back and the answer is, that they use their personal devices. Okay, maybe my design decisions need to be middle of the road. I need to be able to accommodate everyone in that case. So it gives you some insight in terms of what your next steps are. So, Rich, do we have poll results?
We do, Jason. So we had 1,325 people who voted. I see a couple people didn't see it. You may be blocking pop-ups, but let's share the results with everybody here. And you can see that Teams/Skype has 85% of the market. Zoom has 80%. So clearly they're very, very close, and good to see. WebEx is at 53%. Google Meets at 16%. Other platforms around 21%. And BYOD is a very popular one with 47%. So clearly it's a mix. And the great thing is, Jason, you're going to cover how we handle Teams, Zoom, bring your own device, and being able to go between those three in this presentation.
Well, the other thing too to keep in mind there, Rich, on your poll results, I think the other thing that we also have to be cognizant about from our standpoint, whether I'm a Crestron end user or I'm a Crestron reseller or programmer, whatever it is, there's a lot in flux right now. You can't get away from the social media, the news aspect of watching companies modify platforms on the fly. Jonathan and I are both involved in conversations on a daily basis where customers are taking a 2-year migration schedule and packing it into 2 weeks or 2 days. And we're also seeing customers with concerns about the platform that they have and considering other platforms. So it's important that we look at this and we find our general knowledge base so that when the customer comes back and says, I have this, we know what to do. So that brings me into my next piece of information here that I want to look at, which is your approach, right? I put together a very brief a set of responses, and let me qualify my stoplight analogy. It isn't a case where you can't move forward with the customer, but much like approaching a stoplight with a particular color, that will solicit a certain reaction. So if a customer comes back to me and says, we're fully 365, we use Teams exclusively or Zoom, or on the flip side, I think there's a little bit of confusion regarding the on-premise environment. A pure on-premise environment has particular rules that we can adhere to. I can go into a customer with a pure Skype for Business on-premise environment and be successful with a Flex solution. The purity is what we're looking for. Are you all the way over here, or are you all the way over here? And that will help drive. So if someone comes back to me with one of those answers, immediately I'm going to jump in and say, okay, this is where you can go ahead. Let's take the next step. Maybe the responses are a little bit different, and that's going to give me the ability to be cautious. Not necessarily stop, but maybe I'm going to slow down. I'm going to gather some additional detail. And so the answers I'll get in this case, my company is migrating to Office 365 or migrating to an M365 platform. Okay, need to figure out where you are in that process to see if it makes sense now, or do we decide to take up that work in a month when they've moved to a different place and there's less work to do as a result? We're evaluating multiple solutions. Okay, well, if that's the case and you're looking at different platforms, you may not be ready to make a decision on a hardware solution yet, or you're going to move to the BYOD end in that point, or the OpenUC end. POCs obviously are required. Jonathan, I spent a lot of time in the field with customers demoing the solutions. There's obviously a decision process. There's an interest level, a commitment level a company's going to make to a platform. So we understand. And then the last one too, if you have a customer that doesn't have any capability to move forward, that's also a case where you want to stop. Maybe there's another partner that needs to be in the mix, IT professional, independent consultant, things like that, to allow the solution to move forward. The last one I go to is where I stop, and this isn't a stop forever. Just like you get to a stoplight, at some point you'll be able to move forward, but you need some additional detail. If your company doesn't use one of those solutions, Teams or Zoom, then obviously reevaluating the presence of Flex. They'll select their hardware first and their platform later. A bit tricky because you can only pick from 2 solutions, and a lot of times the customers won't necessarily give you that commitment. I need to support all conferencing devices simultaneously. We know in the market there is an interest or a desire for a Swiss Army knife. The challenge is understanding the different platforms because not all of them are deployed the same, they don't work the same. So it's tough to come up with something like that without making some type of sacrifice. So you need to stop, evaluate, figure out where to move forward. The last one, hybrid infrastructures. And when I say hybrid, I'm not talking about a mix of different conferencing service, but I'm talking about on-premise versus cloud. When customers have different components in different spaces, there's some ordering. Normally in a particular case, if you have your rooms in the cloud and your users on-prem, it facilitates a little bit easier use. If it's inverted, it makes it a little more challenging. There are things you want to go into before you put yourself in the space with a UC solution or a Flex solution. Some of those variables will slow you down a little bit. So it's important to stop, pause, figure out where you need to go, and then move forward. So that's my stoplight analogy. As I look at the systems, I always want to gather that detail. And then based on that information the customer gives me, I know how quickly I can move forward with deployment of a given solution, or if I need to spend more time gathering the detail. I use this slide a lot. Jonathan will laugh a lot with our internal sales teams as well, because it allows me to give them some freedom to work with customers on opportunities. If they have a green light, I'm not so concerned about the technical details. I can work on that in line. As that light changes to the other side, I have to be more focused and I have to be more involved in that conversation. So let's explore a little bit about the idea of a platform-based design when we think about the products. And I want to break down what's included or what's part of a Flex solution. Everything comes out in kits. If you're familiar with our products, you go to our website, you can locate, and everything will be in a bundled format. If we break down the kit specifically, 2 of the 3 kits that we offer at a high level are intended to be inclusive. So everything in the box, put it out, turn it on, and that's all you need. We do have an option for a custom kit, and we have another MTA session coming up next Wednesday where we will explore heavily the custom side of the Flex environment. How do I bolt on all these other features? How do I communicate back and forth? The class is called Custom Design with UC in Mind that we'll be offering. And so, like I said, we'll be a little bit more deep dive on that custom size room or retro. But really, the reason we offer those different packages is so you can walk into any space and be able to fit the room and provide a solution that fits either an existing space or a new space. So within that anatomy, if you will, break out the microscope and look a little bit deeper, we end up with a case where we have these 4 key components that are going to be included as part of any Flex system. And I'll lay them out there. We're going to go into depth on each one. I want to highlight one item on the slide here. Why do I have a dashed line between the user interface and the compute device? Differences in platform. Between Teams and Zoom, the user interface works a little bit differently. So it's important to know that each of the solutions has a user interface, but behind the scenes, the communication is slightly different between the 2, and I'll go into a little more detail on that in a bit. So let's talk about the compute device. People give me funny looks when I say the word compute. Why do you say compute, Jason? It's a Nook, it's a computer. Well, Nook is Kleenex, right? The analogy there is referencing a brand as opposed to this particular device. But we say compute for one reason. And the idea from our standpoint, when you hear someone from Crestron say the word compute, it is to help delineate the fact that this is a purpose-built device. It is intended to serve a purpose as an endpoint for a Teams solution or a Zoom solution. And it's not a PC. It's not a personal device because we're not going to load personal applications on it. I'm not going to sideload other things onto it. When it's in use in the room, no one walks in to log in. It's an automated process. It just happens to use a Windows base, or in the case of Zoom, obviously you can go out and third party, you can leverage other solutions, Mac, things like that. But under the hood, we still have that particular device, and that's why we refer to it as a compute. So that's the core of all the solutions that we put out. When we have our Flex kits, both for Teams and for Zoom, there's always an engine, we refer to it as UC engine, at the core of the solution. User interfaces. So within the space, the kits will vary. Our two current interfaces we work with, we have our 10-inch panel, TSW 1060, and then we have our Mercury device, which is our all-in-one solution with a user interface and an audio bundled together. So these become our interfaces. The key that you'll note there from the pictures is they are running a native interface from the platform. So the top image there with the Mercury, that is the native Zoom interface. That particular design and layout is provided by Zoom. We bring it into our products and show that interface. With the Teams solution on the bottom, same thing. That is a little bit older from a picture standpoint, but that is the current. That's what's provided by Microsoft in that point. That's the Teams interface that we're working through. So when we configure the devices, we're putting them into the platform mode. We're not necessarily loading a project. I'm not making anything custom. We're putting them into the mode. The native interface is sitting under the hood of the device. When we flip the mode, now we bring that out, and now that's why you'll see the Zoom interface or the Teams interface on the devices. Each platform employs a different connectivity method. Back to the previous slide. When you're thinking about a team solution, the user interface is effectively tied locally to the engine. We're in effect projecting the interface from the engine onto the panel. And so the infrastructure there will be communication locally between the interface and the engine. We think about Zoom, slightly different. In the Zoom case, both devices reach out to the Zoom cloud, and their operation at that point, they link up and are associated through the cloud. So difference in infrastructure that you'll go through your configuration. They still have the same purpose. They're both native interfaces, just a nuance you want to be aware of as you approach the solution between the two. For Jonathan and I, we're very keen on helping educate our customers on each solution. There aren't too many cases, we don't engage in comparisons necessarily of product versus product. From our standpoint, they're both great partners in the platform space, and each has its own set of benefits, which we love to talk about, and how they interact with Flex at that point. The other two pieces to the puzzle are going to be the peripherals. We'll always have a video peripheral, and that's going to be a camera in this case, obviously, what we're using to send video out to the other participants in a call or a meeting. Communication there by default is USB. If we do have a case, and this really comes into play when we get to those larger spaces, that we have a non-USB camera, there is an option with both platforms to be able to take a traditional video signal, if you will, HDMI, SDI, or otherwise. You can take that camera and we can effectively get it to an HDMI signal, and then from that point on, then we can bring it into the solution via USB. I put a picture up in the slide of the particular converter that we have that's an accessory for the kits. And what that really speaks to is the scale that you can work with on a Flex system. We can accommodate a room for 4 people. We can accommodate a room for 400 people because we have these different pathways to be able to accomplish that fact. Audio, and you'll see a repetition in the slides there. Certified devices. I want you to pay close attention to that, because each of these platforms will certify different vendors' peripheral products. Crestron has an extensive process we go through with both companies to make sure that our products are certified, posted to their respective websites as certified devices. My advice at a design community is you want to make sure that you pay close attention to the certified devices, and here's the reason why. In the previous realms of integration, everything was done on a one-to-one basis. I could take a camera and I could have it talk to the codec or otherwise, and if I could establish the communication in the video, that normally was an improved process. I can make it work somehow. I wasn't worried about any other factors. If I had video and it would communicate, great, I was up and running. With the new solutions, keep in mind there's another entity involved in the solution, and that is the cloud. So we think about your Teams devices. That particular compute device is communicating with the cloud, and so there's visibility or there's knowledge of what's being used. And so in a sense, some of the certification enforcement can be offloaded to the cloud at that point. So make sure you wrap your head around that, make sure you're current. The worst thing you could do is potentially put your customer into a case where you've brought in a non-certified product, and then from a support standpoint, if it doesn't function, you don't really have any roads, because the platform manufacturers, if there's a peripheral concern, will immediately go back to the certification list and say, is this device on my list? And if so, proceed with support. And if not, it's going to be one of those cases where they're probably going to say, okay, try a certified device and let us know what the results are. And that's pretty standard. And it's not a bad thing. They're looking to be able to guarantee working solutions for customers. Therefore, it's why they take those extra steps to be able to qualify and certify those devices. Audio is a big question as we think about some of these spaces. The main thing there is that with both solutions, you can expand to third-party DSPs, other peripherals. Certification is crucial in those cases. But more importantly, keep in mind or keep pace with what's happening at the platform level. Both in the Teams and the Zoom environment, both of those two are working towards leveraging the elasticity and the computing resources they have in the cloud to be able to perform the AEC functionality. Certainly there are cases, and we've all lived and worked in these rooms, where it seems almost impossible to get the acoustics right because the architect has concrete pillars and a glass wall and not a piece of fabric in the room, and it's a granite top table and all those things. There's still cases for the hardware element that's going to be needed, but just keep pace with the platform manufacturers. They continue to enhance their capabilities. By default, some of the solutions have an option that says, cloud AEC, and you actually have to go in and disable that if you want to be able to use a local device at that point. So it's not, don't get me wrong, from a cloud AEC standpoint, it's a great solution. It may not work for every room, but just be cognizant of what's happening in that process and understand that there's a particular reason you want to approach the certified component very specifically. Okay. Jonathan, Rich, any questions we want to take at this point before we move on to the next section? I know you guys are keeping up. Jonathan's doing a great job keeping up in the chat with everybody.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions, Jason. So again, people are asking about, specifically to the UC engine. Are there plans to incorporate that into, into the device? Can they use the Mercury as a standalone device, without the UC engine?
Okay.
Want to just talk about that quickly?
Well, we'll cover the Mercury in depth a little bit later. Jonathan and I both thought it was important to go through a little bit of detail on that. I think the one thing from a trending standpoint that we want to look at, right, for anybody who's dealt with UC in the past, and I know so many people in our community have a wealth of experience in UC, we've had a flip-flop back and forth in terms of customer response to the type of device they're putting on the network. Crestron had a number of solutions in the previous iterations of the room system with Microsoft. If you guys know Jimmy Vaughn, he lived and died by the products where we had Link room systems, Skype room systems, and then we moved into Skype V2, right? So Teams and Crestron this is the 4th gen product that we're into. One of the things we went through at that point was acceptance of a compute device versus a full built appliance. And I would say it's 50-50, split down the middle in terms of acceptance. So the challenges we had in Gen 1, 2, and 3 in terms of acceptance of a device where the engine's inside of it and all the connections are there, that is 100% offset by the community now that is welcoming or accepting a compute device because it's something that's more familiar to them that they can manage. So we get a question quite a bit. I don't know if that was exactly the question, Jonathan, but we get questions quite a bit about, why isn't the engine inside a full appliance, or why doesn't it look like this? And a lot of that's down to the fact of working through acceptance factors within the infrastructure and within the IT community. As far as the Mercury configurations, I think we got that covered a little bit later on. Please continue to submit the questions, and we'll stop and grab some of them at that point. The Mercury's been an amazing product, continues to evolve. If you were on our launch session yesterday for our brand new version of the Mercury, the MX solution, we'll talk about that a little bit. Let's pull those questions there at that point, Jonathan.
Sure, Jason. The other question maybe that we just want to address before we move forward. So some people are asking, why do I need the UC engine? Why can't I use a room PC?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, great question. There's a couple reasons why. We'll talk about them specifically. The most important thing to point out there are the slight nuances between Teams and with Zoom solutions. From the Teams standpoint, what we're dealing with there is slightly different. Zoom is an application, Teams is an image at that point. There are provisions in the Zoom environment to determine which peripherals you want to use. The Teams ecosystem is a little bit different because there are certain requirements placed on the respective vendors or the manufacturers that are producing the solutions to meet certification requirements, to make sure that the products being provided meet the full spec from a horsepower standpoint. The other thing under the hood to keep in mind with the Crestron solution that we have is a component of our product there is our Crestron application that's running on the compute device. And so that's something specific to Crestron, and that's why we produced the UC engine to fit that particular need. So there are some exceptions and variations. You know, a lot of it too is we're dealing with a lot of customers with the Flex solutions that are looking for single source. They want to make sure that they have one person to contact. You know, they don't want to have to work through a distributor necessarily to bring in the PC. That lends itself a little bit more towards Zoom. It's a little more open-ended. The Teams environment is a little more secured for the reason of certification and performance really is what we go after there. Okay, all right, let's move into the next section then. Keep rolling along here. And just talking about approach when we think about design and what steps we might go through. And a little bit different in strategy between an AV design. When we think about that first slide, that second slide I rolled out where we defined what UC was, think about all those different components that were included. Video collaboration, audio, telephony, sharing, things like that. All of those items are in that concept, but they also become expectations. So in the past, a customer might have come to us and said, you know, we need to build a training room. Okay, well, start to think about the questions you're gonna ask, right? Okay, you told me what type of room it is, and now I'm going to bring in the associated technology to go along with it. If it's a training room, all right, I'm thinking about divisible walls and projectors and screens and, you know, breakup of audio and how am I going to have the room operate? You know, the holy grail of programming, if you will, the divisible room system, you know, that we've all spent plenty of nights working on. That was a case where we needed to identify the room type in order to provide that particular solution. UC, complete flip. I need a solution. Okay, well, you're asking other things because the expectation of the room functionality is clear. It's unified communications. I need to be able to walk in that room. I need to make a phone call. I need to have a video meeting. I need to have a webinar. I need to have, you know, I need to share my desktop. Any of those things are included, are built in. And so that's the biggest thing that we need to transition from when we move from an AV-centric design to a UC-centric design is to remember the questions that we're going to be asking are quite a bit different. We get to the end of the UC design. Now we can kind of go back to our previous, or we can go back to what we know in that standpoint of thinking about the enhancements, and we can, you know, make the system better, and we can include the room and do those other things. But it's important to note that those expectations are clear with UC. It's going to perform UC functions. Now I ask the other questions. When we go through analysis, you know, walk a room, you know, walk a building, whatever it is, and go through those traditional steps that all of us have gone through. The order of importance in a UC solution is pretty straightforward. The number one item to focus on is going to be the audio based on size of room, because that's going to immediately put you into the category of what audio device do I need. My rule of thumb is I always err on the side of caution. I'll always go bigger if I need to and bring in the solution as needed. A lot of the technology that we have now and a lot what's coming is amazing from a microphone, from a pickup standpoint. All the new innovations have been amazing. At the same time, we walk the room, we tend to know, you know, the space and like I said, the acoustics. These aren't things that are new to the AV design community, but for UC, designing that space. So my order of importance there, microphone and audio coverage first, camera second, then I have some options for cameras. What's the pickup range on the camera? What type of camera do I need? Do I need a camera that does framing? Do I need a camera that has PTZ control? Am I recalling presets, things like that? The third one you might find interesting is I say infrastructure, because in this case, the assumption with UC is that many of the technologies are purely IP-based, and we're using Cat5e for everything. And there's a little bit of a misnomer there, because in order to bring in a particular camera or in order to be able to move USB 3.0 from you know, the wall to the table or whatever it might be, we may need to introduce other technologies that are reliant upon different infrastructure. I may need shielded cables. I may need to have something else in the mix. Those types of transfer requirements may exceed what I'm dealing with from a networking standpoint. And so I think infrastructure is important. Placement of infrastructure is also key. Based on what I have in the room, I know where I can put the panel, I can do other things. And in a lot of cases, we're piggybacking on infrastructure with many of these rooms, and so that helps you figure out where to go. The last item I put in there is display technology. Anybody in our industry that's worked within the space of Crestron is obviously, a pro in selecting size of monitor. And, I have a ton of respect for the guys that are out there, designing the LED walls and changes in that technology. But it's less important in the UC space because we're simply delivering the video output. It makes it to display. And there aren't a lot of critical factors associated with that. Certainly, viewing others on the far end is key, but that's not a new concept. That's something we went through before with traditional conferencing and presentations and size of your font as it appears on the screen. That hasn't changed. So when you go in and that customer's working with you, that's my order of design importance as I approach a space. So in the Flex line, shift a little bit, talking more about the Crestron products, we offer 3 different solutions. We have our B series kit, which is based around a soundbar and one of our 1060 panels, including an engine. We move to our medium or large rooms. That's where we bring in a solution like the Mercury device. And the reason we move there is we have the radiating pattern from an acoustic standpoint with the microphone and the speakers. And then we move into that custom space. And in the custom space, we're bringing the engine and the touch panel to the mix. And the expectation is that you have other products that are also going to come into play. I'm going to take you through a few designs really quick here just for reference in terms of how these systems lay out. When we think about devices that live in the front of the room, when we think about a small room, we're thinking about the plate you see over there on the left. That's our UC engine. You saw it earlier in the compute device slide. That is the unit that's going to run the meeting. That's the unit that's going to have the Teams image, or it's going to have the Zoom client installed on board. We'll have a USB connection to our peripheral. In this case, audio and video are the same peripheral, HDMI to the display. And then at this point, we have a connection going back to the touch panel. So that touch panel on the table is connected either over the network using Cat5. We also have an option where we can use a Cat5 to connect the panel directly to the engine now. So we have some flexibility, but that's your idea of what a small room system looks like with Flex. Picture there is for Teams, but this is a case where this could be either a Teams or a Zoom room. We move up to the next design size. We move into medium and large, and that's where we bring out Mercury. So the Mercury device moves the audio from the wall to the table. This is always a design conversation I have with customers to figure out if they're used to having their far end audio emanate from the table because they're used to a legacy speakerphone that's out there. And so sometimes putting the audio device on the table as opposed to on the wall helps facilitate their transition forward to newer technology. They're used to having that there to be able to grab and reach for it. So in that point, we can come in along behind those user expectations and match. And then in this case, we still have our compute device and we have our camera at the front of the room. Custom spaces, we move into these. We have a ton of interest in these because so many of our solutions, especially in light of what's happening in the world right now, we're doing a lot of conversion of existing rooms, taking my conference room and making it a Zoom room or a Teams room or whatever it might be. And so in that case, you just have the engine and you have the interface, and you can bring whatever you need to the table. The certified device is key. You want to make sure that those peripherals are in the certified category, but we have our HDMI in and out for content in, display out. We have USB for audio, USB for camera. And the other one we might get into as well is you may end up in a case where you have, let's say we move into an auditorium and we need to make an auditorium a Teams room or a Zoom room for all hands meeting. Maybe the company has a case where we need to be in the big room and individuals in the company, employees are going to be spread out in different spaces to enforce social distancing. Maybe I needed to have that meeting in that room. And if that's the case, you can go to the custom option and take that big space and facilitate it and turn it into a Teams or Zoom. So the point down there at the bottom of the camera, I can have a regular camera that's maybe already installed, take one of the top end cameras from a Panasonic or otherwise that you might have had in a conferencing space, convert it over, bring it in to a conversion process, and then bring it in USB, and then we can recognize it in that case. Quick important distinction to note, and we'll go through a little bit more of this in some of the upcoming sessions that we have with Flex. Ingest devices, so the ability to take a video signal and convert it into USB. There are 2 separate devices that we use within the Flex solutions. The device that lives on the UC engine, you can see it there a little bit on the right-hand side. It's what we refer to as our HDMI to USB converter. It's the 200 model. The difference in the ingest, that particular unit that ships on the board is certified and whitelisted for content from the vendor, from the platform. So either Teams or Zoom has taken that device and they have said, when this device is plugged into one of our endpoints, that will become content. On the flip, if you have a camera, then that's when you're going to use the other converter, which is the 100, and that will be recognized as camera. Remember, in the camera case, a lot of cases where the image will be flipped because you're inverting to be able to send out to the far end. So there's a difference in recognition between the two. We take a lot of design questions saying, hey, I've got one converter that came with a plate. I need 2 or 3 more for other cameras. That particular converter, you'll only ever have one of those in your system because there's a singular content input supported by the platform. On the flip side, if you're doing video from a traditional camera, you're going to use the 100 converter instead. And if you have multiple cameras in that case, you're probably going to switch them upstream, use some type of HDMI switching or whatever it might be, and then bring them into the converter. And then from there, and then you'll switch outboard more from a production aspect, if you think about it that way, to be able to move between cameras in a given space. And we facilitate through regular Crestron controls to be able to accomplish that. But an important distinction at design level, why is that unit there on the plate? It's because it's whitelisted for content ingest. And why do we not sell it separately? Because there's no need, because it comes with the engine, and that's why it's there, and it only supports a singular unit. Like I said, next Wednesday in the session we have, we'll go a lot deeper with some of the custom integration and bringing some of the third-party products in the mix, and what is the custom approach to the solutions and bringing them into a bigger space. The last part of thinking about design for me are the extensions and enhancements. We have our room, we have it set up, and now we think about the other things. Scheduling is an easy one. This comes up all the time with the solutions. I need visibility outside the door. When you think about a team solution, we tie our panels back to the same account that the Teams room solution is using at an exchange level. When we think about Zoom, Zoom has a native application. You can see the picture there on the bottom. It's one of my test rooms. In that case, it runs the native Zoom application. At that point, the look and feel is dictated by the Zoom platform. It links back to the room system. And so now we have that continuity from outside to inside by bringing on this additional peripheral. We can continue to expand those options, environmental controls. I want to add lights and shades, things along those lines, I can do so. The last section of the enhancements phase is really the core product for Crestron, which is still control. And there's a couple different ways you can approach. In the case of a Teams room, I highlighted the button there. If you configure the system in such a way, you're able to temporarily exit the Teams interface, move to a custom page, make any other modifications you need to. We're seeing customers use that page a lot for room reset functionality. I want to be able to reset my audio levels at the DSP to a nominal space, or I want to set the room up for a particular behavior. It's going to be podium or table or things like that. So it takes advantage of what's in the room. But that'll allow me to exit, and then after a particular timeout, it'll bring me back into the Teams interface. Zoom, we have a couple different options. On the Zoom standpoint, we also have the same ability to flip and move out of the interface on our TSW panels. And you can move in and out of the interface, go back to your custom pages. There's also a relatively new option that Zoom has, which is based on their API. And if you see there, I highlighted, there's a room controls button that now allows you to use JSON formatting to be able to link your Zoom room to a control system. And now you can bring some of your controls, those ancillary controls you might need, you can bring them directly into the native Zoom interface, and you can still talk to your Crestron products that way as well. So a bunch of different options. The main thing to remember is once you establish your base for the room and you pick out the right kit, now you can start thinking about anything else that the customer may need to either maintain their expectations for what the room did previously or continue to enhance the experience at that point. Okay, Jonathan, I'll pause for any questions before we dive into the open UC topics.
I mean, I think you've answered a lot of them. There was a lot of questions about, again, why we don't make the converter available separately. Again, because it comes in the kit. There's really no need to. Actually, the last question there about camera control and enabling camera control.
So there's a couple different ways. I think, this is one of those conversations that kind of splits a little bit within the platforms, and having recognition of the platforms makes the answer easier, right? So let's take them separately. In the Zoom case, when I have cameras, the Zoom interface will bring up the ability to switch cameras and give you control through the Zoom application. So if you think about the workflow, camera is being recognized by the Zoom application. And then at that point, if it is recognized with standard formatting, we're talking UVC for controls, then at that point, you will see the PTZ buttons appear on the camera. In the Zoom side, if you have one camera, you don't have a switch button. If you go to two cameras, it becomes a toggle and you move back and forth. And if you have more than two cameras, when you press the item, it becomes a list. But in the Zoom interface, it's all native inside that standards today for camera control. If I have a non-USB camera, or I have a camera that doesn't necessarily conform to some of those standards that are needed for the application, I still have the ability to move in and out of the app or leverage the enhancement, the room controls API functionality, and I can offload the camera control to a Crestron system, which can control that camera. And we see that a lot of cases where we're talking about retrofitting existing large rooms, and they've already made the investment in the camera, and they have their regular PTZ controls on the touch panel. We bring those in, and then at that point, exiting the application or referencing the controls page, and PTZ controls, everything like that can exist there. So that's the Zoom side. If we think about the Microsoft side of the house, it's slightly different. So today, PTZ controls are not native inside the Teams application. We know that it's Microsoft has recognized that it's an interest from customers. I've seen it logged on a couple, roadmaps and websites like User Voice, where users can go in and they can acknowledge particular needs or request functionality. So we know it's out there. At the same time, that doesn't mean it's not possible. We have a couple different ways we can accomplish it through our engine, using that same technology for the type of control that the Zoom application will recognize. I can bring into my interface, and on that flip out, I can put controls in there to control that device over USB without necessarily introducing a control system into the mix. If I need to go to that next step, that big room, like I mentioned, you can still do so, and that page flip will have PTZ controls. They'll go from the interface to the Crestron control system and then out the camera in a traditional form. So all kinds of options. It is very doable. Don't think because it does or doesn't appear on the application that you're boxed in. There are ways to accomplish it. We're seeing quite a bit of it, especially, like I said, right now, a huge focus is to enhance or to flip an existing room and make it into a Zoom or make it into a native Teams room. We've had a lot of customers with traditional video conferencing solutions, and now everyone's gone home. They've started to use Teams, and when they come back, that particular system isn't compatible with the way they work now. And so we're seeing a lot of that. And so the camera control question, Jonathan, is very, very relevant to what's happening right now. And we can work through, the UCTDs across the country and the world. We can walk you through some of those examples. We don't have a map in the presentation today, but we'll make something available for you to be able to locate the version of myself or Jonathan that may be working in your region, and we can certainly consult with you on the steps you might need to take. Okay, so I'm going to jump into OpenUC and hybrid designs. Some of this is relatively new. Like I mentioned, we just launched a product yesterday. I'll talk a little bit about MX. But our approach here with the OpenUC solutions, from the Mercury standpoint, this product's been out for quite a bit of time, extremely successful product with Crestron. Amazing, all the features were put into the one solution. The idea with OpenUC really comes down to a couple reasons. Why would a customer be OpenUC? If you think about the nature of business, this is always the story that I tell. You will have some companies that will dictate how the other companies that will work with them. Think of an automotive manufacturer, for instance, right? You have the parent company, and then you will have specific vendors, and there'll be a parts supplier, and the parts supplier will sell a particular component to the parent company that's assembling or building the vehicle. Well, if the major platform dictates a particular standard, and let's say this particular car manufacturer uses a Zoom platform, then the reality is that most of the companies that do business with them will also need to accommodate Zoom as well, because that's how they will be most effective in communicating with that parent company. But let's say that company, the parts supplier, also sells to another manufacturer. Maybe they sell tires. And all the automobiles are going to need tires in some form. They're not exclusive to a particular brand. And company B at that point, maybe they use a different technology. Maybe they use Teams at that point. So it puts these companies in a position where they may not be able to standardize on a platform. And so OpenUC is the solution to be able to allow them to use technology in the rooms, but not be locked into one particular platform. The other case we see is when we have influence at a high level in the company of preference on a particular solution. I know multiple companies in which different executives or individuals in the company are familiar with a particular solution, and their business unit uses a particular conferencing solution, and they're siloed enough to where it doesn't really matter if the accounting group is using Teams and engineering is using Zoom and somebody else, because there isn't as much communication between groups. So there's plenty of case studies, examples in which an open UC environment might make sense. The idea of this product was to be able to allow you to approach any customer, no matter where they were in the journey, and be able to provide them a solution. So we have our Mercury product. This is, like I said, it's been out, not a new product for us, had all kinds of features built in under the hood. A traditional Mercury solution would have taken your device, placed it on the table, and then you would have had corresponding connections go out of the device, camera, HDMI to your display, plug your laptop in and go through that process of having the camera pass through the Mercury to your laptop, audio going the other direction as well. And so this really was the core for the Open UC solutions, to be able to accommodate all users' devices and not be platform-based. We recently came out with a new product. I don't know, Jonathan, I'd say buried in the tagline a little bit with Mercury X. But really the product here was a next generation from a hardware standpoint. The Mercury X, very similar to Mercury, but at the same time, what it did is it facilitated infrastructure. And so we're talking about a case where instead of having all the particular connections come out of the unit, now we're talking about having a single connection come out of the device and then moving those other connections to the display to make it a little bit easier from an installation standpoint, a configuration standpoint, a little bit cleaner, but it's a new option that we've recently added. So this is the Mercury X product. Your typical design here, devices on the table, and I'm going to have that Cat5e connection, and that's going to carry my video, that's going to carry my audio, and my USB back and forth, and then it's going to leverage that single Cat5 for those functions. So like I said, this is a product that's been out, introduced earlier this year, and so that's Mercury X. The third offering in the space is brand new, and that is the MX product. And so when we think about MX, we're talking about a blend of both worlds. We're including a platform in Teams or Zoom, but we're also providing users the ability to leverage their own device if they need to move to a platform that is not that native solution. So a customer may have Teams, but they need to have Zoom, and then what they can do is they can move out of the native interface, use their laptop, and be able to present, and that looks like this. And so we're in a case where we have our personal device on the table. We still have our compute at the display to operate without a user laptop on the native platform. But the key catalyst, the most important thing here with this particular design to be aware of, is the USB cable and the connection to the laptop. In an MX environment, as soon as a user takes a personal device and plugs in USB from the Mercury into their device, that is the recognition from the solution that we need to move out of the native mode, Teams or Zoom, and move into a case where I'm leveraging that particular user's device to do whatever they want to do. The HDMI connection certainly comes along with that, but there are cases in which you might be inside your native presentation and need to present wired. Maybe it's an outside vendor, and then at that point, you're just looking at the HDMI connection. So keep that in mind when you think about the MX at a solution level, is that it does allow you to approach, allows you to facilitate for customers. There are some wonderful things on the horizon inside the UC community where you're seeing conversations about what's called guest join with the various platforms. You're looking at cases where Microsoft and Zoom and Cisco are all working together to be able to facilitate interop between their various solutions. They're still working on it. It's still coming. At the same point, we know for some customers, they just need to be able to move to another platform. I'm in Chicago. We cover a good amount of the Midwest, and there's a lot of customers in this space that have standardized on GoToMeeting. Even with guest join, some of those functions may not be there. So for us, this was an alternative to be able to blend your platform solution also with whatever other aspect you may want to bring into the mix in that case. And so that's MX. Like I said, the announcement was yesterday, so my slides are short here on that solution. I'm sure you'll be hearing more about that from all your Crestron contacts in the near future. And then the last thing I wanted to wrap up with the Mercury session is give you a little bit of an idea of the journey that you may have with the device. Jonathan, I'll tell you, we field questions all day about, I have this, what can I do with it? How do I go from here to there? He's giggling in the window over there because I can see that, you know, this is a constant question for us. So when we think about,
there's about 40 people asking that question right now, Jason.
Excellent, excellent. Well, good timing on the slide then, Jonathan. Way to go.
Should we ask them a question then? See what they think they can do?
Sure. Absolutely, Rich.
So let me ask the team. We're going to give you a polling question. Let's make sure you're listening and paying attention to what Jason's been offering. Do you think you can upgrade a Mercury, standalone Mercury, bring your own device solution to a Flex MX?
I should have stayed on the last slide, Rich. We're giving away the answers.
Yeah, I know you are, but I'm making it easy for them. Let's see if they're paying attention. We want to help them. We want them to be successful. That's our goal here. Because it's very important to understand what the differences are. And let's face it, we offer a lot of technology, and it is important to understand the differences is not a software difference. It is a physical hardware difference. So I'm giving a hint here to the answer in case anybody wants to change their mind. We'll give them another 10 seconds, Jason, and then.
Sounds great. It's a common question, Jonathan. The fact that 40 people are asking or whatever it is at this point is, you know, it's the reality of the situation. When we made the Mercury product, you know, flexibility was key. And then as we've rolled that forward, that product has been included with a number of the other solutions. So giving some insight on where you can go and what you can do is key.
So Jason, I think we need to spend some time on this, maybe a little more than we planned.
Okay.
Because the reality of it is you cannot upgrade a Mercury unit to a Flex MX. Okay,
so let's go through
not a firmware, it's a hardware difference, and I think we need to spend some time on that.
Sure, yeah. Let's go through the grid here, and then we can address some additional questions. So when we think about the products, we think about Mercury, right? So this is the product that's been in the market for a while now, and that particular Mercury device was intended out of the box for open UC solutions. And so I put it on the table, I connect my laptop, and I can leverage my conferencing service from my personal device to be the codec for the solution. As we move forward and we introduce the Flex products, we gave you an option to retain the Mercury device, but instead of being the all-in-one, it changed its role in the solution, and it went from doing everything to performing effectively two functions. It became the device that handles the interface, and then it also handles audio, so microphone and speaker both. And so we take the Mercury and we blend it and we make it part of the larger Flex solution. And we do that by adding the associated product that is the compute device, the engine, if you will, for the solution. And the SKU there is the UCM150 upgrade is the name of the item. So if you have a customer and they have a Mercury and they want to move it forward and say, Mercury's great, but my company is now platform-based, and I need all my rooms to either be Microsoft Teams rooms or I need to be Zoom rooms. In that case, the appropriate step to take there is to add the UC engine in the form of the upgrade kit to that solution and move you forward and go from the BYOD experience or the Open UC experience and make that into the native experience instead. The Mercury X, as Rich mentioned there, is different than the Mercury. The regular Mercury solution on the output of the unit has an HDMI on the back. On the Mercury X, it's actually a Cat5, think HD-based T-style format at that point, going out of the unit where everything gets bundled in together. So the Mercury X, out of the box, functions just like the regular Mercury, except for the infrastructure change that instead of having the cables come out of the device, I'm talking about a single Cat5 that carries audio, video, USB up to the receiver, and then that's the breakout, if you will. We don't have a SKU yet, but we are working on it, which will give you an option to take a Mercury X system and then be able to add the native experience to it. So to Rich's Q&A point there, a Mercury X device, newer gen, will allow you a process to be able to move to an MX solution. The regular Mercury device can be revved forward to a native solution, but there's a decision there. It either is a BYOD, it's an open UC device for conferencing, or it's a native platform, but you have to select between one of the two. It doesn't mean you can't reuse that hardware and make it part of that bigger solution. But the distinction there, the line that you'll see there, is between the Mercury and the Mercury X based on the communication and based on the format. The Flex MX product is the newer one, and that's where we have the mix between the user laptop and between the native interface. There's an option for Teams, there's an option for Zoom, and then obviously the Open UC option is built in by default. If I plug in that USB cable, as I mentioned, then at that point I can move from the native interface over to the BYOD interface. When I unplug the USB, the system immediately flips back and goes back to the native interface, so someone can use the space in a native format at that point. So important distinction right there in the middle between the Mercury and the Mercury X as you approach those solutions. There's certainly a great path forward for customers to move from their OpenUC and become native, but a slight nuance between going native and then going native and retaining your OpenUC functionality at that point. Anything else there, Jonathan, outside the lines on that we want to talk about?
No, again, I think maybe we just want to be clear in terms of, when we add the UC engine by way of the M150 upgrade, at that point, again, we're taking the Mercury, again, away from the OpenUC and into a platform specific, right? So we're giving up all of the other OpenUC functionality, the Air Media, the Bluetooth, the VoIP capabilities. All of that goes away because now we're tied into that platform, whether that's Teams or Zoom. The same is true on the Mercury X. So the Mercury X today is available as a standalone device, again with OpenUC, but until when we release the Flex MX kits, again, those will also have all of the Air Media Bluetooth features deprecated because they'll be tied into the specific platform. And
the experience that you'll have when you're bringing your own device is that you are facilitating the pathway of USB. USB peripherals are no longer communicating with the native interface. They are then communicating with your laptop. So that gives you the sharing. Let's say it's a soundbar. That audio and video is routed back to your laptop while that USB cable is plugged in. When you unplug, then the switch goes back and moves back and provides that peripheral back to the native device at that point. Excellent. And like I said, if you have questions, certainly a topic for all of us on the Crestron side. We're happy to help you through this journey. I fielding questions, like I said, Jonathan, no joke, every day. Customers really are focused on that native experience and how do I get from A to B? Happy to jump in and tell you what the steps are and how to get from one to the other. As we go into our last section here, what I want to focus on next is a little bit of platform information. So if you came to Masters last year, I did a session which was 100% focused on Microsoft Teams. I think I said the word Crestron once or twice in the 90 minutes. And it's important, extremely important, to be successful in the UC space to have knowledge of the platform itself. You need that supplementary data, number one, to be successful with the deployment, but also number two, to be able to effectively communicate with your customer and vice versa. If you end up at a point, the last thing you want to do is necessarily concede the platform information to the owner of the solution or the company at that point. You want to be keeping up, you want to stay current, because so many of the features that may enhance your experience are going to come from the platform, and it's important to get that information path from the platform as well. So I want to talk just a few minutes here in depth about the particular solutions. So when we think about what is a Microsoft Teams room, we're really talking about taking an existing room or a new room and enhancing it with all the power of Teams. So if you think from a Teams standpoint, everything you can do on your desktop, that you can, audio calls, meetings, conferencing, all those different things, effectively we're enabling a physical room, a physical space with all of the rich features that come along with Teams. It is a licensed room account function in the cloud version in M365, and you're talking about a Teams room. It isn't licensed like a user. If you're familiar with the Microsoft environment, you know the various tiers, E3, E5. If you're dealing with education, you know the levels there as well. The Microsoft Teams room is a specific license inside the portal that you apply to the room. The room's not going to be doing any productivity work, so it's licensed only for the collaboration functionality. It doesn't get Excel or Word or anything like that at that point. So it's a specific SKU that's being used for a room. And really what it does, it provides you one-touch join experience for your team's environment. If you look on the image there on the right side of the screen, you have a join button. What it does is the system, as it's invited to a meeting, then pops up a button on the screen. The user will walk up to the screen, the meeting that's occurring that they're joining, they'll click the join button, and everything else will happen in line. System will join the call, camera is fed, audio lights up, all of those different things that go along with it happen at that point as a result of that press. And it's because the room is part of the Teams ecosystem, it has the knowledge about the ability to join the meeting without any other programming intervention per se. That is the native experience. Our products are getting that update directly from Microsoft. Microsoft releases updates for the Microsoft Teams Room application. Those come to our devices, so you're always lockstep with what's happening on the Microsoft side. You're not performing any programming as a necessity. If you want to add features to both solutions, you can do so, but it's not a requirement for any of these particular systems to operate. Under the hood, a compute device. I say a tethered user interface because in that case, we know that the UI will communicate with the engine. We have our audio video peripherals. We need that meeting room license. And the deployment process for these systems is image-based. So from a Crestron standpoint, when we provide a Teams solution, a -T device, we're performing that functionality up front. We're sending out the unit. It's built on that image that's been vetted on both sides, Crestron and Microsoft together, with our particular components that are required to run our solution. And then at that point, we push that out. So when you're taking one of the units, unlike some of the previous iterations in the past, you're simply turning it on and you're dropping in your credentials and then you're going to go. So rolling into my next slide. Under the hood, we have a settings page that we'll go through. So if you have one of these units in the field, you're going to go in, you're going to click on account, you'll drop in your credentials. And honestly, at the device level, the credentials and the peripherals are the keys. All the rest of the functionality, whether or not this room has a telephone number, whether or not this room has some other enhanced features, are all dictated inside of the Teams admin portal or that web interface that governs your organization. And so the device itself is going to inherit all that. What you only need to put in the device, obviously the credentials for the room, and then you need to set up your peripherals and choose which audio device I'm using, which microphone, whatever it is, as you have things connected. Services, like I said, dictate a platform. And then, if I'm on the installation side of things or the deployment side of things, what do I need from my customer is I need username and password at that point. Those are the critical items I need to be able to log in and fire the system up at that point. 2 weeks from now, we have another MTA session that is focused specifically on the Microsoft side of things. A couple of my colleagues are going to be offering that session, and they're going to spend the bulk of that session looking at a Flex solution with regard to Microsoft from the Microsoft angle, looking at the portal, looking at the config, looking at the licensing. So if there's an interest on your side in terms of looking at the Microsoft angle a bit deeper, that'd be a great session to be able to drop into. You'll hear the acronym quite a bit, referred to MTR, Microsoft Teams Room, and there's a picture of my admin center that I have that governs my devices. I'll go through and I have a device tab and I can govern and modify elements. All of that work can be done in two ways. I can either do it from the web user interface. If you're also savvy or you prefer it like I do, command line, certainly you can use PowerShell at that point to be able to generate your accounts, configure more of the platform-based functions at that point. So the two go hand in hand. There's obviously needs to be communication between yourself and the owner of the platform to figure out what it is that you need. You'll find, just like Jonathan and I do, you'll spend a lot of time having a conversation in the middle. You won't be talking about the room system. You won't be talking necessarily about users, but you will be talking about the Teams portal. You'll be talking about some of those components with your customer, or vice versa. If you're on the customer side and you have ownership of the solution, how do you communicate with the reseller or the integrator? This is the meat in the middle that you'll go through in these cases. I popped up some resources as well. This, obviously, the deck is available later and the hyperlinks are active in the deck. The top one on the left there, if you're working with a customer and they're not familiar with the Teams room experience, that is a great site you can go to. It gives you an agnostic walkthrough of what a room solution looks like. And you can go through and you can click and it's interactive and there's a little bit of video and things like that. But in more cases, think about the scenarios where the customer needs a POC and thinking about the world right now, it's a great way to send them out and say, here's a great example of what a Microsoft Teams room is. Watch the video, go through the interface, and then let's talk about taking that next step and getting hardware. Both solutions, Microsoft and Zoom, are great in terms of virtualizing the experience and showing you what it's like before you bring it in, and dealing with logistics of getting a system. And certainly there's a place for that, but there's some great resources. I also pointed out the device portal. So Jonathan, I'm sure the question is, where do I figure out what devices are certified? There's the portal right there from Microsoft. And then on the right-hand side, a couple documents. So Crestron has a pre-deployment checklist to help you through your thought process. And then we have a security guide specifically for the UC engine that we've published. When you think about that computer, you're bringing a computer into someone's workplace. They're probably going to have a lot of questions about configuration, deployment, what can I do, policies, OUs, AD, GPOs, whatever it might be. We put out the security guide to help you have that conversation with your customers and go through that process. Okay. Any Microsoft specific questions, Jonathan? Like I said, otherwise, Rich helped me. MMS-201 is the name of the course that we have coming up in 2 weeks that is Microsoft focused, if you will.
Yes, let's get the exact date and time here. Hang on 1 second.
Yeah, there's lots of Microsoft questions. Again, they're obviously very specific to people's unique situations and those sorts of things. And maybe that's a good time to say that one of the things that certainly we recommend is partnering with one of the Microsoft systems integrators.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you, especially too, if this is a solution on the Microsoft side that you're interested in pursuing, if it's a case where you don't necessarily have the back end yourself in your organization, there's a subset community which will be sometimes referred to as an SI or an MSI, Microsoft Systems Integrator, and they're really the glue for helping customers deploy the overall platform. And as this solution expands, their role has changed because they're starting to expand into the room space. The licensing that's set up on the portal is key. So certainly, if you don't have the resources in-house, or you have an opportunity, then look for a partner in that space. You can search by some of the vendor partners as well. Microsoft Gold's a good starting place, but it's a great way to foster partnerships. Jonathan, to your point, it's a two-way conversation. I know a lot of the MSIs in my local community in the Midwest, and it's back and forth all the time. Hey, I have a customer that's interested in rooms. Jason, can you talk to them? And then vice versa. Hey, so-and-so, I've got a customer that wants to do rooms, but they're having problems with their Skype to Teams migration. Do you think you guys might want to jump in and consult with them? And so it's a lot of two-way traffic. So excellent point, Jonathan. I'd certainly recommend looking to foster some strategic relationships around the platform in this case.
Absolutely. And on top of that, Jason and Jonathan, as you all both know, we have several courses that are much more in-depth, continue to build on what is presented here. We have the MAV-203, Custom Design with Unified Communications in Mind, slated for May 13th at 11 a.m. Eastern. We also have Secure Design Principles, which answers a lot of the questions that were being brought up about how to design for secure systems and answer the questions of your IT teams. In addition to that, we have MMS-201 Flex Components on May 21st, which is another detailed aspect of Microsoft Teams and Flex. And of course, for those of you who want to work with the IT professionals, we do have a course, MEP-203, on May 27th. So this is just the introduction. I know there's literally hundreds of questions coming in, and Jonathan and I are trying to answer as quickly as we can. But a lot of them are covered in other courses because we only have 90 minutes to get across a lot of information. So hopefully you will all be able to join us on those courses. You can look at them. They're posted on our website, get you a little more insight as to what's going on as well.
Excellent. Thanks, Rich. Great info. Great info. And once again, crestron.com/masters for all those details. All right, let's take a look at a little bit at Zoom from a platform standpoint. There's a lot of similarities between the idea of the platform-based design. There on the right-hand side, you have the Zoom experience. That's the test tenant that all of us use there from the Crestron standpoint. In the Zoom platform, they also have a specific SKU that is called out to license a room system. One-touch join, invite the room to a meeting, walk up to it. You can also leverage Zoom's unique capability for meeting IDs. There's a keypad, you can go and punch that in, click the join button there, and you can go in and put in the specific room code from that experience. And really, once again, native experience. Like I said, both these solutions are great. Each one has some amazing feature sets. They are slightly different at a platform level. But the Zoom room experience allows users to walk into that space, not have to lean on a personal device to run the meeting, walk in, have my meeting, so on and so forth. We think about what makes up a Zoom room. Again, a compute device. The user interface at this point slightly different. The initial connection is to the cloud, obviously, with the registration process as opposed to being tethered to the device. We still have our peripherals, audio and video. Zoom also has their certified process. We have that license agreement. Like I said, the deployment's a little bit different. From Crestron's standpoint, the value of a Zoom-based Flex system is the singularity of a complete solution that comes in together. But we fully know and understand that in the Zoom environment, there are multiple variations in terms of devices that can run the client. And there are certainly pros and cons to that conversation. It's great that you have flexibility. If you want to build, you can still leverage Crestron technology in a Zoom room in addition to or outside of Flex. But we do find that the major draw for our customers right now is the single source and having a fully vetted solution and having the all-in-one process. We pre-image the device through our development process, which means we're set up, we have the application installed correctly, and all the nuances that you have to go through at that point to be able to facilitate the correct communication and have the device set up correctly. So we take a lot of that lift off in that case. So there are merits to both, don't get me wrong. But we leave that to our customers to figure out what's best for them at that point, and we know that we can create the solution around whatever that need is. When you think about a Zoom room on the ground, what you're really looking for is if you're out there deploying a room, from the owner standpoint, what you need is you'll need an activation code. When a room is created inside the Zoom portal, it's assigned an activation code. That activation code can be handed over at that point, entered in the device, and it will then link your physical device back to the portal and associate it with the given room, much like you do today with any entertainment application you might have on your phone or otherwise. You have that measure of a code that you need to punch in to associate those devices together. On the ground, your setup is relatively minimal. Again, very similar to the Microsoft interface. You're going to make sure you have your peripherals selected, pick your camera. In this case, this was one of my demo rooms. I used the Mercury in this case, so this would have been an M150Z configuration that I was working with. And I have used my Hudley Go for this particular solution, but those are the steps you'll go through in terms of configuring the device. Everything else, just like the team solution, is all handled upstream, and it's all done. All the config happens at a cloud level, so you don't have to physically touch the device other than selecting peripherals and then associating or affiliating the device back to the cloud. There's the portal, just like the Microsoft version. I have the Zoom portal. I can go in, click on my Zoom rooms, and now I can go lay out my particular system, set it up accordingly. All of that work is done in the cloud, facilitates our deployment. Very quick, very easy in this case to do everything else, and all those changes then trickle down to the devices as well. Again, resources. So Zoom has the landing page as well, which is great. There's a wonderful video there on the landing page for the Zoom Rooms overview. Take you through that. If you want to go to the certified rooms device products, you can click on the device portal, and then again, our pre-deployment checklist and our security guide are also both there as it relates to both of these products at the same time. Okay. Any Zoom specific questions, Jonathan?
A lot of questions here.
Okay. Well, remember, we'll be here at the bottom of the hour after we wrap up. We've got one more section to go. We'll be happy to answer those many as we can, and we'll also provide a Q&A response as well.
Sure. So there's, again, a lot of people asking about, maybe it's a good time to talk about it since we're sort of at the end here, Jason. A lot of people are talking about, call status and API and indications in terms of integration. Do you want to take a minute and just talk about where we're at with those things?
Yeah, there's a couple things to be aware of too. There's some active developments going on. If we think about the Microsoft standpoint, we were dealing with a case where on the previous generations of hardware, there were certain APIs that are open, and with Microsoft's overall change and move to Graph for much of the inter-application, intercommunication on their solutions, we've recently seen some openings for Graph detail rolling through to be able to query Graph and get some of those details. We still have active conversations with Microsoft looking for some of those automation touches, Jonathan. I want to know when my meeting starts and my meeting stops and things along those lines. So it's still active. It isn't anything that was forgotten. I do troll social media a lot, and there's a lot of comments that it was a forgotten aspect, and it's more of a change at a very high platform level that we're working through with our partners, both with Microsoft and with Zoom as well, to extract those additional details. There is a full recognition of the value of those trigger points. We're just working through it at this point. And there's even some folks on the Crestron standpoint. One of Jonathan and I's colleagues on our team on the UC standpoint, everybody in programming is very familiar with John Otteson, but John's even gone to a point where he's starting to look at mining Graph for other details and thinking about what else we can do there. If it's in addition to the product or if it's something else that we're looking at, it's a very active topic, and we continue to work with the manufacturer partners, with the platform vendors, to enhance the experiences. On the Zoom standpoint, a little bit different. There's a couple triggers that have recently come to light. If you use the integration with the built-in API out of the application, you do have the ability to use some behaviors and some methods to be able to trigger other functions. I think there's good recognition on both platforms. I don't think it's going to happen tomorrow, but the conversations are very active between all parties to try to continue to enhance. I'll be honest with you, a great driver right now for this is the idea of moving towards those zero-touch experiences. There'll be a lot of innovation around features because of that need to enhance these particular solutions to perform those functions. So I think we're in a good spot. I think there's certainly improvement that needs to be made, but we'll continue to push on our end, and at the same time continue to explore other alternatives to enhance the solutions. Okay, I want to talk briefly about the same topic as it relates to OpenUC. When we think about Mercury solutions, we think of them in the same vein. We have that device that is able to bring in whatever conferencing solution that the user wants to have on their particular device. When we think about that solution, we're as designed. Any licenses in the case of a Mercury solution, those are going to be at the platform level, and they'll be handled or managed at the user device level for Teams or for Zoom or whatever, WebEx or GoToMeeting or anything else. It's going to be a function of the personal device. And for us, our deployment in these cases with XIO Cloud. So with XIO Cloud, we have the ability to manage the Mercury devices, push configuration, change settings, all kinds of different things there. We have multiple ways to configure Mercury devices. Local web interface is our first starting point. XIO Cloud's another option. And if you're slightly on the other end towards the higher programming community, we have EDK information, Enterprise Development Kit, that allows you to use other technologies to be able to provision devices. So whatever option works for you, we have something to fit. And again, this is a device that is configured out of the box, no programming for Mercury. We are seeing good growth into other topics, such as certified drivers. We're seeing our programming community harness that capability and bring it to the configuration level to enhance the experience, but out of the box, custom programming isn't needed for an OpenUC based Mercury solution. A couple links for the Mercury product, as well as XIO Cloud for overview, and then obviously the brochure for Mercury as well. Okay, so as we reach the bottom of the hour here, right on time, Rich, was there a question we wanted to poll everybody at this point before we jump into the last section?
There is, Jason. Based on everything everyone has seen, I think it'd be good to know if where people think they can use Flex solutions of any kind. The Teams, the Zoom, the Mercury, the OpenUC, the Byod, where do they think that Flex can be used? And this is a multiple choice. You can pick as many of the answers as you would like. So we look forward to doing that. We'll leave this open for about a minute. And people are going quick, which is good. So we'll see, let that get going.
Excellent.
We'll let that run for a little bit while people are answering. There have been a ton of questions coming in about camera controls, display controls, API access, and usability. So
Yeah,
there's
great.
quite a lot of things going on, including access to PEXIT, how the devices are updated. So there's a lot of things going on, and we'll try and answer. We will get these all answered to the community here when the PowerPoint is posted, the video is posted, the question and answers will be posted as well. So you'll have all this information, all of the items that you're asking, we're going to get you answers to. Unfortunately, we cannot answer the, let's see, how many are we up to now? 350 plus questions, Jonathan. Well, you and I don't type that fast, huh?
Well, hey, it's great. It's great. We love the interaction. You know, like I said, the other thing too that we'll do here as well is Rich mentioned a point. I mean, this is a very deep conversation. And the reason we have 3 different sessions here, and, you know, we had I'm trying to think for the physical event, we had almost a whole day designed around the Flex products and talking about these solutions. It's because, like I said, there's significant depth. So when we think about the other MTA sessions, as well as other offerings to get this out there, the community is great. Jonathan, I would probably tell you this, that one of the things we found is that there's a significant amount of information sharing and knowledge that is passed around freely in the UC environment. People are really concerned with each other's success. You know, there's been some battle lines drawn recently between Teams and Zoom as things have started to escalate here, but at the same time, the community is wonderful. So in addition to you know, talking about Flex, a lot of those conversations, if you want to get into a deeper dive on platform, there's a lot of resources out there that you can certainly jump into and be a part of in that case.
And I was going to
Rich?
follow on that, Jason. I mean, certainly, again, we've got resources, you know, distributed around the world. Certainly, there are people on this call today, you know, from around the world. So we have UC resources specifically in everyone's geography. So whether that's Asia Pac, whether that's EMEA, whether that's here domestically in North America, Canada, US, Latin America, we have resources. So reach out to us. Again, we'd be happy to help with your design questions, your you know, implementation questions, some of those red, green, blue sort of consulting things. Absolutely.
So let me go ahead and share the results. Very interesting to see how everything was laid out. So this was kind of a trick question. And the reason it was a trick question is, truthfully, depending on your system design and depending on the application of Flex, and Flex covers Mercury and all these devices, you can apply Flex solutions in every single one of these environments.
Yep. And you think about that driver, right? The driver is the behavior. When
Correct.
you talk about UC, the expectation is all of those different features, and so they fit very well. So, you know, we talked about it briefly on Tuesday. You know, the home office is another case, you know, for the conversation, you know, that I have, Jonathan and I both, when we're working with demonstrations right now, since customers can't get to their offices, each of us has, you know, I'd flip my camera around it, MTR solution here and a Zoom solution here. And, you know, we're using that to facilitate many of those conversations. So absolutely, there's a place for it anywhere. And the line is flexible enough. You know, you look at the, like I said, look at the size of the room, look at the acoustics, look at your audio coverage that you need to start with, pick the kit. You know, you're narrowing down and then you're making it large again when you think about your enhancements to create that overall experience. So it'll fit any of those places.
Exactly.
Okay,
exactly.
Let's wrap up with, sorry, Rich?
I was going to say, it's exactly what you just said. And the key here is what this course is about. And this course is the designer's course, right? And it is geared about what you need to do to design a system to meet the needs of your client. Because as designers, your role is to solve the customer's problem, right? You all know that you can do that. That's what your job is. That's what your role is. And that's what, as a technology architect, your goal is to accomplish, is to remove their objection, to solve their problem, and provide them a solution for any of the spaces we've listed here. And they're probably way more than we've shown. So think about that as you design your systems and you put things together. You have the flexibility and the power to determine how you can use the technology they need.
Yeah, I'll expand your Q&A, Rich. This week, Monday, I talked to a city. I talked to a municipal lead for a city, and they're looking at Microsoft Teams rooms in all of the firehouses. And City Hall is where the origin point will be. They're going to drop in a small scale Microsoft Teams room into every firehouse across whatever it is, 5 or 6 counties, and that's going to be their communication method in the interim. And they're going to do trainings that way, and they're going to bring in outside presenters because they can't facilitate a lot of those in-person meetings anymore. You know, you have to think about this product as going anywhere the customer needs it to go. So with that, I'm going to wrap up with some keys to success in approaching these spaces. Platform knowledge is critical. I would tell you that between Jonathan and myself, when we communicate with our colleagues and our team members, 80% of our conversations, 85% of our conversations surround what's going on with the platform. So make the investment if you can. If you can't, Jonathan brought up an excellent point, partner. Find someone you can work with. It'll help enhance your experience. Trade off, have them license your portal, and you know, have them have a MTR in return or something like that, so you can collaboratively increase your knowledge gain. It will pay dividends beyond belief when you're having the conversation with your end customer, with the owner, because it facilitates that open conversation. We teach a lot of people about Teams and Zoom when we're in these conversations, because we're doing it because we're tracking the product. The customer is doing it because of the change in the workplace that they're currently going through. So it's a great opportunity, you know, to invest in yourself and be current. Split ownership is critical. You have to remember when you're bringing one of these systems that you don't have full autonomy for support in any capacity. When we have our pre meetings that we go through with customers, normally it's myself. I have the platform administrator, Teams and Zoom. I have an infrastructure administrator who's in control of the network ports. I have the Exchange admin. You know, it's multifaceted in these spaces. So make sure when you approach that, you have a strategy that you know how to bring everyone into the conversation and work with all parties, and especially post-sale. What's your post-sale plan? For Flex systems, the greater percentage of our customers have the expectation that they will maintain and support themselves at a greater percentage because it's the platform and not the hardware than before. So make sure you have a strategy going into that point, so it's clear, because you are dealing with not dual ownership, but you know, it could be a number of people involved with ownership of the rooms and the device, and especially for support. Where do I start? Who do I call? The last thing I'll say is think about inclusive design, and really take a step back. You know, look at your system top down, know your platform and know what you can offer based on the platform. Consider the use of the user's devices in your plan. Laptops, iPhones, Android devices, tablets, anything like that should be part of your consideration, because it is part of the workflow. Whereas before, you probably were only dealing with a laptop, and yeah, we moved through the wireless presentation phase and working through those products, and that's still critical for a lot of people. But if you think about that, you also have to think about how the behavior changes, because presenting my device to the display was one thing, but being in the meeting and sending content from my device into the meeting from a personal unit is a different strategy. And so the last thing there, focus on the behaviors first. We see too many cases right now where there's some assumption of technology that comes in. Well, I have this, and I want to focus specific on the nuts and bolts that I need for the system, and people aren't having the conversations with the customers. This is somewhat disruptive because you are making a significant change in the workflow of a room. You're going from a custom UI to a native UI. You're talking about different focuses. So have the conversation and ask your customers, or in reverse, if you're the owner and you're talking to your reseller, figure out what you actually want to support. It's a great time to manage the change. There are cases where some of the tech you might have is included within the platform and you no longer need the extra peripheral to do so. Or you say, you know what? We're going to transition our users over to use that functionality that's inside the native platform as opposed to having something else on the outside. It's a very open conversation, but behaviors need to be first, and then technology will follow. It's needed, certainly, to facilitate use and UC in the meeting room, conference room, and everything else where it's listed. But make sure you place your focus on establishing what behaviors are warranted or required, and then think about what the tech that goes along with it is. Okay, a couple more resources. If you're looking for additional detail on the products, crestron.com/flex. Masters information is there, our security portal. And again, for any initial information about the products, you can reach out to our various technical sales teams around the country. They can also get you in touch with the group of individuals like myself and Jonathan that are focused on the UC space. Okay, Rich, and that brings us to our last slide, which is the plug, the advertisement for our next master session. That is Monday, and that course is focused around the user experience and specifically our AV framework product.
Correct, and that'll be taught by Delix Alex, who is our product line manager for AV Framework, and Sharath Abraham, who is one of our technical sales engineers. And they will be talking about AV Framework, Air Media, covering all aspects of simple room configuration, hardware design, user interface, customization, device drivers, deployment options, and all the wonderful features within AV Framework, which is a configurable solution and not necessarily a programmable solution. So we look forward to people joining us for those for that class on May 11th. And having said all that, I think we're going to wrap up the presentation at this point. And then we'll stay around. Jonathan and Jason and I will be more than glad to answer questions. We can, if you have the option to raise your hand, we're more than glad to try and answer you that way. I am going to go ahead and end the recording, okay? But it will be live questions and answers will remain for a little bit of time while we go through these hundreds of questions for the team. Thank you all very much for joining us. We greatly appreciate your time and effort. And for those of you who stick around afterwards, you get a little bit of extra. It's kind of like hanging out after class in a live session for real. Thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate it. And we'll stay on board for a little bit of discussion via chat or live. Thanks all. Be well.
Thank you, everyone.